The coin laundry on Birchwood Avenue closed at 11, but most nights the last dryer was still running past 10:30, and that was when Thomas Carter usually arrived. He came after his shift at County General, still in his work boots, still carrying the particular quiet that 12 hours in a pediatric ward tends to leave on a person. He would load his machine, sit in the plastic chair nearest the window, and read. He did not talk to people, he did not invite conversation. He was 41 years old, a widower of 3 years, and he had learned to occupy space without demanding anything from it. His daughter was 9. Her name was June. She came with him on Tuesday nights, because Tuesday was the night his neighbor, Mrs. Pauline Hirsch, played canasta with her sister in Glendale, and there was no one else to watch her. June did not mind the laundromat. She brought her colored pencils and drew on the backs of her school worksheets, and occasionally she would press her nose against the porthole window of the dryer and watch the clothes tumble, which Thomas had stopped finding strange around the 4th or 5th time she did it. It was a Tuesday in late October when she first noticed the man in the corner. He was older, maybe 65, with a gray beard trimmed close and the kind of posture that suggested he had once cared very much about posture and had gradually stopped. He sat with his back to the wall and a single grocery bag at his feet, not a laundry bag. A grocery bag, the plastic kind, twisted at the top. Inside it, visible through the thin plastic, were a pair of dark socks, a folded undershirt, and what looked like a single flannel work shirt. He fed quarters into the smallest front loader, the one in the back corner that everyone avoided because it had a slow leak around the seal and left a faint mildew smell if you left things in too long. He sat back down when the machine started. He did not have a book or a phone. He watched the wall. June watched him for a long time before she said anything. She said it quietly, the way she said things when she was not entirely sure she should say them at all. "Dad." Thomas looked up from his book. "Why does he only have one bag?" Thomas looked at the man. The man did not look back. He was still watching the wall or something past it. "Some people travel light," Thomas said. June considered this. She turned back to her drawing, but her pencil did not move for a while. The man's machine finished before Thomas's. He moved his things to the dryer with the careful efficiency of someone who has done something many times in difficult conditions. The undershirt, the socks, the flannel shirt. He added one more thing that Thomas had not seen in the bag, a pair of gray work pants folded into a tight square. He sat back down. June leaned toward Thomas and lowered her voice to a volume she believed was a whisper, which it was not entirely. "Dad, does he have somewhere to go tonight?" Thomas set his book face down on his knee. He looked at his daughter. She was watching the man with an expression he recognized from the hospital, from the parents of very sick children, a kind of helpless, specific attention, the face of someone who has noticed something they cannot unfocus from. "I don't know," he said. "Can we ask him?" "June, I'm just asking if we can ask." He did not answer right away. He looked at the man again. The man had his hands resting on his knees and his eyes on the row of dryers, and there was something in his stillness that Thomas recognized in the way a doctor recognizes certain things. Not as a diagnosis, but as a pattern. The controlled quality of someone conserving effort. The careful neutrality of someone who does not want to be noticed. "Not tonight," Thomas said. She accepted this. She went back to her drawing. But when the man stood up 40 minutes later to retrieve his clothes from the dryer, June was watching, and Thomas was watching her watch, and neither of them said anything else about it. The following Tuesday, the man was there again. Same corner, same grocery bag, same gray flannel shirt, now the one being washed. He wore a white undershirt while he waited. Thomas noticed these things the way he noticed things at work, as is information not yet sorted into meaning. June noticed them faster. She set up her pencils on the chair beside her and arranged them by color the way she always did, and then she looked directly at the man and said with no preamble at all, "I'm June. What's your name?" The man blinked. He turned his head slowly, as if making sure the question was actually directed at him. "Walter," he said. His voice was low and slightly roughened, the voice of someone who did not use it often. "I'm June Carter. That's my dad. He's a nurse." Walter looked at Thomas. Thomas gave a small neutral nod. "Walter Bream," the man said, which Thomas understood as a response to the introduction, and also as an assertion of something. That he was a person with a last name, which should have been obvious but apparently felt necessary to establish. "Do you come here every Tuesday?" June asked. "Most Tuesdays we do too." She held up a drawing. It was a rabbit in a thunderstorm, which Thomas thought was not a great drawing but showed genuine commitment to atmosphere. "I drew this." Walter studied it for a moment. "Is the rabbit okay?" "He finds a barn," June said. "I haven't drawn that part yet." Walter nodded. He looked back at his machine. The conversation appeared to be over, and Thomas thought June would let it be, but she was 9 and she did not always know when to let things be. "Do you live near here?" she asked. There was a pause. "Close enough," Walter said. Thomas watched his daughter process this. She had grown up in a house with a man who answered questions the same way, with information technically accurate but selectively shaped, and she had developed, in response, a very precise instinct for the difference between a partial answer and a full one. She did not ask again. Thomas ran into Walter the following Thursday morning at the gas station on Fletcher, a block from the laundromat. Walters was buying a cup of coffee from the machine near the register and a package of peanut butter crackers. He had the same gray flannel shirt. It was clean. Thomas bought his coffee, and on the way out he held the door, and Walter came through after him, and they stood for a moment on the sidewalk in the November cold. "The coffee here is bad," Thomas said, because he said it every Thursday, and it was true. Walter looked at his cup. "It's hot," he said. Thomas drove to work. He thought about that for a while during his shift. In the particular way he thought about things that were not medical problems. In the background, without urgency, but with a low, persistent attention. "It's hot. Not it's good, not you're right. Just the thing it is." He mentioned it to no one. The third Tuesday, Thomas brought an extra thermos. He did not think about it as a gesture. He thought about it as logistics. He made coffee at 6 in the morning. He had a second thermos from when he used to bring one for his wife, Margaret, on the nights she worked late, and it seemed inefficient for it to stay empty in the cabinet. He set both thermoses on the bench between his chair and the empty chair beside it, and when Walter came in and settled into his corner, Thomas said across the row of washers, "There's coffee if you want it, black." Walter looked at the thermos. He looked at Thomas. "I didn't make it for you specifically," Thomas said. "I made too much." This was not true, but it was the kind of thing that gave a person room to accept something without it becoming an event. Walter stood up, came over, and poured himself a cup. He nodded once and went back to his corner. June, who had been watching this from behind her drawing, said nothing, which, for June, was a significant act of restraint. In December, the temperature dropped in a way that the city was not fully prepared for. The laundromat was warmer than outside, but not by much. The heating unit above the door rattled and produced something that was more suggestion of warmth than warmth itself. Thomas noticed Walter's jacket for the first time that night. It was a canvas field jacket, olive green with a corduroy collar that had worn thin at the edges. It had been a decent jacket once. Thomas estimated 10, maybe 15 years ago. He did not say anything. He poured the coffee. June showed Walter a new drawing, a heron standing in a flooded parking lot, which was strange but somehow not inappropriate. "Do you draw?" June asked. "Not in a long time," Walter said. "You could try. I have extra pencils. I'm all right. You don't have to. I just have a lot." There was a pause. Walter looked at the pencils she was offering, a blue and a brown, held out in her small hand with the simple directness of a child who has not yet learned that offering things can be complicated. He took the brown one. June went back to her heron. Walter turned the pencil in his fingers for a while, then found a receipt in his shirt pocket and began very slowly to draw something on the back of it. Thomas did not look. It felt important not to look. When the dryer stopped, Walter folded the receipt and tucked it into his pocket with the pencil still in his hand. "You can keep it," June said. He put the pencil in his jacket pocket. "Thank you," he said, which was the most Thomas had heard him say at once. Thomas was not a man who sought explanations for things he could observe directly. He had spent enough years in hospitals to understand that the causes of a person's situation are often irrelevant to what the situation currently requires. What the situation currently required, as far as he could tell, was coffee and neutral company 2 times a week, and perhaps occasional warmth, and those were not difficult things to provide. He did not think of it as help. He thought of it as proximity. But he was also a man who believed in knowing what he was dealing with, and so in mid-December, on a Thursday morning, he asked Walter, over the bad coffee on the sidewalk, if he was staying somewhere close. Walter was quiet for a moment. "I move around some," he said. Thomas nodded. "There's a shelter on Kenmore," Thomas said. "It fills up fast, but they hold spots for veterans if you sign in by 4. Walter looked at him. The look was not hostile, but it was watchful. "I'm not asking for details," Thomas said. "I work with intake nurses. I know how it works." Walter drank his coffee. "I was a machinist," Walter said. 30 years. Shop closed 4 years ago. I'm not." He stopped. "I know," Thomas said. He meant it. Walter looked at the street. A bus passed. A woman with a stroller walked by with the efficient focus of someone going somewhere cold. "The shelter on Kenmore has a good coordinator," Thomas said. Her name is Rita Doss. She doesn't make it into a thing." Walter did not respond. They finished their coffees. Walter went in one direction and Thomas went in another, and Thomas did not bring it up again. Christmas was on a Wednesday that year. Thomas worked the holiday shift because he always did, because it was easier than not working, and because the ward needed experienced staff on the holidays and he did not have anywhere he was urgently expected to be. He and June had their Christmas on the 23rd, which June had accepted at age 6 with the practical logic of a child who understood that some things are when they are. He did not see Walter on the Tuesday before Christmas. He came to the laundromat with June and they did their laundry, and June drew a picture of a bear standing in a doorway, which she said was the bear deciding whether to go in or stay out, which Thomas thought was a lot to put on a single doorway. He did not know what Walter was doing or where he was, and he did not try to find out. On the first Tuesday of January, Walter was back in his corner. He had a new jacket, not new exactly. Thomas could see it was used, but newer than the canvas one with the worn collar. It was a dark green wool coat, knee-length, the kind sold at military surplus or Goodwill. It was warm. That was clear from the way Walter sat differently inside it, without the subtle forward hunch of someone trying to hold heat in. Thomas poured coffee and set the thermos on the bench and did not mention the coat. June, however, said, "I like your new coat, found it," Walter said. "It's a good color on you." Walter looked down at the coat and then at June with the expression of someone who has not been told, recently, that something was a good color on them. "Thank you, June," he said. In February, Thomas arrived at the laundromat to find Walter already there, but not in his usual corner. He was standing near the bulletin board by the door, looking at a flyer. Thomas read it over his shoulder without intending to. Machinist. Part-time, flexible hours, Hartwell Tool and Die, East Side. Walter stepped back when he heard Thomas behind him. "That's not far from here," Thomas said. "I know where it is." Thomas loaded his machine. He said nothing else. June had a school project due and was working on it at the folding table, and the laundromat had the ordinary Tuesday sounds. Machines running, a television in the back corner with no one watching it. After a while, Walter said, still looking at the bulletin board, "My hands aren't what they were. Most people's aren't." Thomas said, "I haven't worked a lathe in 4 years." Thomas closed the lid of the washer. "You'd remember. That's usually how it goes with something you did for 30 years. Walter said nothing. Thomas took the flyer down from the bulletin board, which required pulling out a thumbtack, which was a deliberate act requiring deliberate intention, and set it on the folding table near Walter's chair. Walter looked at the flyer for a long time. He did not pick it up. Then he folded it in half and put it in his coat pocket. "I'm not telling you what to do," Thomas said. "I know that. I'm just saying the flyer was there. I heard you." The machines ran. June finished her project and came to sit beside Thomas and showed him something she had drawn on the margin of her worksheet, a small figure standing in front of a large machine, reaching up toward it. She did not say what it was. Thomas did not ask. He was at the nurse's station when Rita Doss called him in March. She said, "Your friend came in." Thomas had not known Walter had been given his number. He had given it to Rita Doss 4 months ago in a context he had not thought of as significant. He looked up the place himself, Rita said. Came in on a Wednesday. Clean, sober, polite. Didn't need much in the way of orientation. "That sounds right," Thomas said. "He said someone told him to ask for me specifically, that you said I don't make it into a thing." Thomas was quiet. "He starts at Hartwell next week," Rita said. "The machinist position. Part-time to start." Thomas said, "Good. He didn't want me to tell you. Then why are you?" There was a pause. "Because I've been doing this job for 11 years and I don't often get to make this kind of call." She sounded matter-of-fact about it, which he appreciated. He thanked her. He went back to his rounds. The last Tuesday of March, Walter was in his usual corner when Thomas and June arrived. He had the same grocery bag, though Thomas noticed the bag itself was newer. Not plastic, canvas, the kind with handles. He was reading a paperback book, which was new. June said, "You have a book." "I do." "What is it?" He showed her the cover. It was a history of the Great Lakes shipping trade, which was not a book Thomas would have predicted, but people are seldom what you predict. "Is it good?" June asked. "It's informative," Walter said, which was not quite the same thing. June set up her pencils. She had begun bringing an extra set on Tuesdays, a fact she had not explained and Thomas had not asked about. She pushed them across the folding table. Walter looked at the pencils. He looked at Thomas. Thomas looked at his book. Walter picked up a dark blue pencil and found the folded receipt he apparently still kept in his coat pocket, now soft with use. He began to draw something on the back. This had become, Thomas realized, a Tuesday thing. Not a project, not a story, not a before and after. Just a thing that happened on Tuesdays at the coin laundry on Birchwood, between a man who had stopped needing to explain himself and a man who had learned, slowly and at some cost, that help given without conditions was not the same as help given without thought. June finished a drawing of two herons standing in separate puddles and held it up for both of them. "They're not together," she said, "but they're in the same rain." Walter looked at the drawing for a long time. "That's good," he said. Thomas agreed. He did not say so. He picked up his book and the machines ran and the night outside the window was cold and ordinary, and nobody needed anything from anybody that they were not already getting.